Hello and welcome to another episode of Where Everybody Has Gone Before, a Star Trek episode discussion podcast where we know that we're not the first, we won't be the last, but we are one of the shows doing this. I'm your host Laura, I'm here as ever with Geoffrey. How are you doing, Geoffrey?
I am pulled by Voyager.
Yeah? Voyager's, how is Voyager standing up to the journey we've done so far of Prodigy into Enterprise into Voyager?
We've had some really odd rolls.
Look, you let the random roll of the dice decide where we go. Sometimes we get some strange ones.
Sometimes we get a look into Ensign Harry Kim.
Not,
Would you like to just tell the people like what we've rolled
yeah,
here before we
yeah.
start?
So we rolled 460 on the episode list of Star Trek episodes, and that was Voyager season 3, episode 20, favorite son, which is a as you suggest is a an Ensign Harry Kim focused episode, and not the first character from Voyager I would have picked to watch an episode about. A character that the only thing I could really tell you about off the top of my head is it's really odd that 7 years on this journey and he never gets promoted above ensign. Um,
Well, there's
it's his
no
time to
upward
shine.
movement, is there? Because they're trapped in the Delta Quadrant.
I suppose so, but
Unless somebody dies, he can't.
I
There's
feel
no
like you
room
can
for him
give
to.
him an honourable additional stripe and no change in job role, but like, I think 7 years in you have to go, look, you're not an ensign at this point. You've got experience. We even if the Starfleet back home won't recognise it, I'll draw another stripe on for you.
Well, let's be honest. This episode alone proves that he does not deserve to be a lieutenant.
Yeah, you're not wrong. This doesn't. It's not the episode that fills me with the most confidence for promoting Ensign Kim. Um,
I think I so I would like to start by saying I'm not the biggest fan of Voyager. I think it's a show that didn't really realise its potential, and that's something I feel more so having watched Battlestar Galactica, right? A series which I also feel doesn't reach its potential. But I'd also say I don't think we've ever had a bad actor in the captain's chair.
hmm,
I might be missing someone, like one of those transient
yeah,
captains. But broadly speaking, we've never had a bad actor in that spot.
yeah,
And coming into this episode, having not seen Voyager for about 10 years,
yeah.
I really got to say, Kate Mulgrew just killed that role. Even in
Absolutely.
this terrible episode, she has got everything. Like the way she switches from,
Mm.
oh, we're just kind of having a first contact moment. Isn't that lovely? To what the fuck are you doing,
It
Harry?
it
Is
was it
terrific.
it was so nice to get to watch her in Irrelevant in this episode because like I come to this from the other end of the spectrum. Voyager is maybe my favorite Star Trek season, and I acknowledge the problems that it has. I enjoy it as a I acknowledge it's a messy Star Trek series. It's kind of what I love about it. I very much enjoy the making poor decisions without oversight, because you gotta make the decisions that are gonna hold this crew together, whether they are sensible long-term decisions or not, and I think that makes for an interesting story. Whether it meets its full potential, I enjoy it a lot. But yeah, I am a big fan of Kate Mulgrew as Captain Janeway, and as little Janeway as we get in this episode, because so much of it is taking place not on Voyager. Um, the whole little interaction she has at the start with Ensign Kim, she goes through a real range of like really well controlled emotions that I really respect. We'll get to why that is in a second. The premise for this episode, we start with first of all, finally not a two-parter. Hooray for an isolated single episode. Um Ensign Kim is having deja vu as he flies through this bit of space. It feels oddly familiar. Um, a mysterious ship, the Nasari, this crew goes, "Hey, you're in Nasari territory," um, and then Kim has this moment of they're gonna fire on us, and without any concrete evidence, without the captain say so, he starts firing on this Nusari ship. And initially, when this what seems to be Voyager has provoked a fight, this is where we get Janeway's like little set of emotions that she is incredibly in control of things during combat. Like, go to red alert, got the whole crew, like the whole crew is on her word very well. She storms up to Kim and is like, "Explain yourself. Like, I'm gonna be stern. Give me your explanation." Um, he tries to explain, basically just he had a hunch. I love the phrase she says. She says, "I trust your intentions, but your actions are going to need a little more justification." It's such a good way of going, look, I'm not disregarding your expertise as the person on that position, and we'll come back to it. Um, but what you have said is not enough for me to say what you've done is okay. Um, and like we talked about Enterprise the other week, and the fact that like when the person who was piloting down that shuttle through the atmosphere goes, "I insist that I did it right. I didn't cause that fire," and the captain just makes no effort to try and follow up on it. As angry as Janeway is, she does go, "Crew, go look for evidence of Kim's theory. I'm gonna remove him from the bridge. Like, he is not allowed. He cannot be trusted on the bridge right now. But I will investigate what he said. I'm angry at him. I don't have enough evidence to believe him, but I believe him enough that I will give him the benefit of the doubt and look into it." Like, that's such good captaining.
I was going to reference exactly the same thing because
Mm.
obviously we were talking last week about the fact that we don't really know what kind of Captain Jonathan Archer is because he has no solid definition. In about 5 minutes, you know exactly who Janeway is. You know that she is competent, compassionate, doesn't jump to conclusions, isn't going to sit there and regret the moment. She's not going to sit there while we've accidentally started a war, probably. It's just, no, we're in the moment, we're sorting this out, and then we will address everything else later. I just think it's and again, I don't think that's entirely down to just Kate Mulgrew, because again, I do think Scott Bakula is a good actor, but it's good writing combined with someone who knows how to use that material. And I've just said that's good writing.
Yeah,
which is not going to be true for the rest of the episode.
The thing that I think it does so well is that it really encapsulates what kind of captain she has to be. Because even if you've not like been watching the rest of the series and you jump into this in isolation, it's very clear she cannot afford to be the kind of captain that like allows things to slide on her bridge, because like, Voyager's journey is so precarious. She's like, the second you do something you did not have approval for and you cannot properly justify why you did, I have to get you off this bridge, because we cannot be going off vibes here. That cannot be precedent we establish as okay. But I do trust my crew, because I have to have that back and forth trust with them, because we are the only people from our bit of space we've got. I'm not.
Yeah, she cannot afford to just drop a crew member for fucking up.
And she can't.
There's not enough crew members to go around.
Yeah. And she can't afford to have a crew member resentful because like it turns out they did the right thing and she didn't believe them. She's got to go, at the very least, I believe you enough that I will look into this. I will give you a chance to be right. And like cycling back around to it later, I really appreciate that when it becomes clear that Kim was right, that like they were preparing to fire on Voyager first, she does not like, she doesn't gloat about it, she doesn't make it an "I told you so." It is just a very matter of fact, you do not need to apologize, Kim. You were correct. We need to work out why you were correct. She's very like, I did what I had to do then. Now I have more information. Let's get right back to it, to following that intuition and understanding what it is. She's very pragmatic in that way, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, how telling is it that we are spending so long on like the first 2 minutes of the episode?
I really don't want to have to get to too much of the Ensign Kim stuff. It's bad.
But we must. It's our job now.
Yeah. So, before we know for sure that like, oh yeah, they were actually going to shoot on us first, Kim has some dreams. about injuring B'Elanna, but also having Mendokan pox and being looked after by his mother, and then
So a
his
mother he
mum.
conflates with Captain Janeway. Like
Yeah,
his mother gives him one of Janeway's orders. It's really weird.
yeah. His mother suspends him from duty. Like it's clear he's having fever dreams, and not everything is quite correct in his head. Um, and then he wakes up with alien symbols on his face, or as the Wikipedia page would describe it, he wakes up with a new rash.
He wakes up with he's like a red trill.
Yeah, it's very Trill. It's very Trill markings. I do like, and again, before we get into the big chunk of this episode, I like a lot of the supporting characters in this episode. The holographic Doctor, I really like that he doesn't write off the idea that Kim's dream might have been prophetic as to what illness he had. He's surprisingly open to, yeah, maybe you are ill in a way you've been ill before, and your brain was like trying to make sense of that and to tell you something. I am open to. You don't have any obvious signs that Mendokan pox is what you've got, but I'm willing to give you another scan over and check if it's that. I'm willing to believe that could have happened.
It's also interesting that he does it in the same sarcastic way he still does it in Academy.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, we talk about Kate Mulgrew. Robert Picardo, also a
Oh,
very good
yeah.
actor and singer.
Indeed. Um, so yeah, it becomes clear that Ensign Kim's been having strange premonitions. And again, I like that Janeway's very, very like she's openly curious about this. She doesn't have an explanation for what's going on, but she's open to the unexplainable, which is nice. But he's got this real deja vu. He could swear he's been here before. They're trying to work out, is it time travel, alternate realities, alien psychic powers? Um, no, maybe it turns out maybe he's a member of an alien species from the Delta Quadrant, is what we're going with. Um, they are met by a species called the Terresia. He during his weird dream he saw their planet before arriving at it. And they're like, "Hey, welcome home. You're one of us. We shipped a bunch of fetuses off around space, and you came home. Your DNA pulled you home. It's good to see
Which
you,
I think is
child of the stars."
yeah, I think that's a really interesting idea. I think the
Yeah.
idea of, which is very Superman, but I do think the idea of someone as being unwittingly called home. I think it would have been really funny if that's why they were in the Delta Quadrant. But
If Ensign Kim had like subconsciously ruined something early on to get them pulled here.
yeah, like because he happens to be on Voyager, they've been pulled to the Delta Quadrant because he has to go back to this
Yeah.
planet, which is his real family. But it's also like this, the way they put it of, oh well, we send this out and we implant the embryos into
Hmm.
your
Yeah.
human mother, and we promise that's not weird at all.
Yeah. Well, the way they try and justify it, they don't even explicitly say it, but I think the way they want the audience to see it as not weird is that it's implied that Kim's parents had struggled to conceive for a while, and that maybe the implication is meant to be, the alien came to Earth and found a couple that was struggling to have a child and bestowed upon them a child. You know, that child's going to be sort of called spiritually back to the stars, but like, you got to have a kid out of it. Um, which I don't think makes it any less weird, but I can see the attempt at justification. But the idea is this is a species that's like the way that we get genetic diversity is we implant our fetuses into other species around the galaxy. They pick up a little of the host parent DNA. They come back here. We're a genetically robust species. Um, Also, don't worry about where all the men are. The men go out to deliver the fetuses, and that's why there's no men here. Don't worry, it's all just beautiful women. Come on, Kim. Come to the planet of the beautiful, sexy women who would very much like you to enjoy your time with them.
Very handsy women,
Yeah,
right? Like
immediately
the
handsy
moment he
women.
arrives, specifically him, like there are other men there,
Yeah.
specifically him, they are just all over him, and he looks so uncomfortable.
Yeah, this is a theme throughout this episode. Ensign Kim is not comfortable with physical intimacy with women, and he does not have a good radar for when women would like to fuck him. And a vast majority of this episode is going to be very beautiful women going, Ensign Kim, I would like to stay with you in your bedroom with my clothes off this evening, and then be one of your brides once we've, spent a night together. And Kim's like, oh, are you here to read me bedtime stories? Just oblivious to everything happening around him.
So I think this is a combination between the writing and Garrett Wang not being a great actor. I felt like every single scene that was on the planet felt like it might be the introduction to like a really bad 80s porn.
Yes.
It's like, are you here to read me a bedtime story?
Well,
yes, I am.
Every one of them...
80s music.
Well, the problem is every one of them reads like the setup to a bad 80s porn that the main character doesn't know he's in. Like, here's the beautiful sexy woman wants to give you drugs that will enhance your mood and have zero negative side effects. Would you like to have some mood enhancing drugs around these beautiful women? No, thank you. I'm here for work.
Do you like being tied up, Harry Kim? Well, that could be exciting.
That could be, but also then my hands would not be able to move in an emergency, you see. That sounds very unsafe.
But then he does like a literal somersault to get away from sex. Like he somersault over the bed when the woman approaches him. It's so odd.
He does
it's
somersault away from sex, yeah.
Like I mentioned to you earlier, like imagine if Chakotay was on that planet, it would be so easy to so we should mention that this is all like a trap, a lure, and then they kind of suck all the life out of the men like they do on the Mummy, when the Mummy sucks all the people out and they go all dry and desiccated.
The idea is that you pick which 3 of these people you want to be your brides, and then you immediately get married to them, and they fuck all of the fluid out of you. That's how they procreate. You're not secretly one of them. Kim got infected by a flower, went on an away mission at some point previous.
I forgot about that bit.
Yeah, he ate a flower or something, and now he's got alien DNA.
It's such a weird. Oh, you're gonna have 3 women fuck you, and it's going to be so intense that you just dry out.
Yeah,
you're not just empty. You completely dry out.
Look, I feel like they would have more success if they literally just had a sign that said, "Hey, if you are not from this part of space, while you're around, planet of women who are hot and would like to have sex with you, please deposit a healthy amount of your genetic material, not so much you become a husk, and then off you go." I feel like people would willingly travel across space for planet of the women awaiting your deposits.
Can you imagine if Riker was put onto that planet?
Oh, God.
Like, the mood enhancers just wouldn't work on him.
I feel like the problem would be you'd give him his 3 wives, they would fuck him, they'd try to fuck him dry, and he'd be like, you ready for round 2? And they'd be like, why are you not a husk
he would just fuck himself out of that situation. Like, that would be the twisty episode of TNG. It's like, no, I was just so good at sex and so good at trombone that it didn't work. It wouldn't even be an episode because he would just be like, that's a great planet. We should all go there. There'd be no signs that anything's wrong.
Things about this... There are some things in this episode that, like, while it's not overall great, I do like the attempt they make to justify the science of the bullshit that turns out to be a trap. Like, hey, it's already possible in humanity for DNA to form neural pathways that give you knowledge. Human infants are born recognizing face shapes and knowing to hold their breath if they're underwater. It is possible for DNA to give you innate knowledge as a member of a species. That's just what's happening to Kim. And I'm like, I appreciate that they've put some effort into making the lie conceivable. Like, it's not immediately obvious that this can't be true. You know, it's a little too good to be true, the planet, but like the science could hold up.
There was something about it that felt really off.
It
was like the conversations about you have a responsibility to pass on your
Yes.
genes that started to feel a bit eugenicsy. And I don't know if that was deliberate. Like,
Oh,
this is
I
a
I think so. I think you're meant to be uncomfortable early on.
well, I don't know, because this all seems very accidental. It doesn't like it's not like they've picked Harry Kim, and also why would you pick Harry Kim as like the progenitor of the future of your race? So I don't know if it is a bit. It was kind of leaning into that in a way that felt a bit
Hmm.
strange to me. Um,
Yeah.
but that said, like the writer on this, Lisa Klink,
Hmm.
is an interesting one because she wrote like she didn't write a lot of episodes of Voyager, but she was kind of a script supervisor. But she also worked on like a bunch of other stuff from the
Hmm.
90s. So she wrote an episode of Roswell, which is like, I don't know if that's a show you
Interesting.
remember.
Yeah.
She wrote a few episodes of Hercules, the Kevin Sorbo show. She also
Okay.
wrote a bit of Martial Law, which I don't know if that's a show you're familiar with,
Familiar
but
with,
that's
never seen.
oh okay. Well, it's
Hmm.
a little tangent. It's a great little show in which Sammo
Hmm.
Hung, obviously very famous Chinese
Yeah.
martial artist, is in. I think he's in Los Angeles, and he becomes a police officer. He's like on an exchange program, and he just does lots of kung fu in Los Angeles. And I think his name is Samo Law, and that's why it's called martial law.
Oh,
It's terrible. But she also
yeah.
wrote like a pretty decent episode of DS9. She wrote
Hmm.
the Hippocratic Oath, which is the one where Dr. Bashir and O'Brien get
Hmm.
stuck on a planet with the Jem'Hadar, and he has to help them get over their Ketracel White
Yes,
addiction.
yes.
Like, that's a good episode. That's a decent
Yeah.
episode, but it also has that B story of Worf getting into hijinks because he doesn't like how Odo runs security on the station, which feels more like this
Yeah.
episode.
Well, looking at this episode, like you ask questions like why would if they could have picked anyone, why Harry Kim? I do think there is a point to be made for this kind of trap is going to work better on someone who's a little bit Ensign Kim, a little bit. I want to feel like I'm special, but I'm a bit overlooked. 7 years in, I'm still an ensign. You sell someone like that the vision of you are specially uniquely destined to come to the planet of women who want to fuck you. Um, yeah, I can see that working because like we joke about how like Chakotay would be all in on this. I think Chakotay has enough going on in his life that he would question it a bit. He would go,
Yeah,
"Hang
he
on a
has the wherewithal
second.
to realise that something's a bit off.
Yeah, you. This does
I
kind
think
of
I
need someone a
think
little weak-willed."
to give uh, Lisa Klink a little bit of credit, I do think it was probably deliberate that Tom Paris was on that planet as well at the beginning,
Yes.
because obviously he's the big contrast of he's a
Yeah.
womanizer, he's confident, and then
Mm.
Harry is the insecure one. So there's a
Yeah.
bit of a shift there. He finds it odd that everyone's all over Harry and no one's interested in him, and I
And
think that's a
yeah.
deliberate contrast that
And
actually really works at showing that Harry
yeah.
is this insecure kind
And
of nebbish, dorky guy.
and Kim is the kind of person that you can kind of talk into like not pushing to leave for a while. Like you can tell him a little bit of a story and he'll just kind of go with it. He's suggestible in a way that I imagine is helpful when you're having to like put up a force field around the planet to stop the ship coming back to get him. And be like, no, no, oh, negotiations must be taking longer than thought. Why don't you just come stay the night with us? Because,
Yeah,
like,
he's basically just
yeah,
incurious, isn't he? Which is why it's
yeah,
so odd that the other guy who's on the planet feels like more of a Tom Paris. And like
it,
he's
yeah,
like growing out with Paris of like, oh, it's so cool here. There's so many beautiful. It's like it doesn't really feel like it gels quite as
mm,
strongly when he's already there and fallen. Maybe he's fallen for it just because he's out for
yeah.
adventure. Like he says that, right? Doesn't he? And I
Well,
really know. But
yeah. I try and think like what would happen if you put a Tom Paris in this situation, and how do you get a Tom Paris to be that other person on the planet? And I think the way you do it is with them being overconfident in, well, I'm too good to be fooled. Maybe you have a little bit of like a Tom Paris type going. I used to get to have fun with women, and now I have to be boring and buttoned up and suited, and like, oh, I'm part of a crew now. I'm being given like not only permission but like encouraged to explore my new identity for 24 hours. Yeah, I'll do the drugs. Yeah, I'll bang some beautiful space women. Um, and before he's had a chance to stop and think about it, he's ensnared in it. Like, I can see the ways that different kinds of people would fall into it, but again, it feels like you need like a consistency of what is it you can prey on in someone like this to get them to stay long enough to get ensnared.
Yeah, it's you'd be more familiar with this. Is are Paris and B'Elanna Torres together yet?
I don't believe they
I
are
don't think so,
yet. I
right?
don't believe they are yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, I suppose they can't be because he's really perving out on all the women.
Yes. And
But
yeah.
so, like, my memory again. I only watched this like an hour and a half ago. My memory is that guy's talking about, oh, I joined the merchant fleet so I could get away from home and
Yeah.
be adventurous. So I guess that's kind of how you do it, right? Is that this is
Yeah.
the end of your. I mean, the whole it lays out its allegory, right? In that he's talking about the sirens at the end,
Yeah, they
and
make
that's why
no
everybody has to be tied up.
yeah. There's no subtlety to it. He just turns to the camera and goes, "So Odysseus with the sirens, right?"
But I suppose that's
Yeah.
kind of the point it's trying to make, that it doesn't really matter that once you hear the call,
Yeah.
this unwitting desire to go home in inverted commas, that you're just you're snared, as it were. And I think that weakens what could have been an interesting look at how to manipulate Harry Kim.
Yeah.
I still don't think Garrett Wang is the actor to pull that off.
Agreed.
I think the episode suffers for that.
Hmm.
But I think the basic premise there works if you don't feel the need to blankly explain it at the end by going, by the way, guys, have you heard of sirens?
Yeah, did you know the idea of beautiful women luring men, like history books and like old stories talk about that.
Talking of sirens, right at the end of that episode,
Hmm.
Harry Kim's all like, "Oh, Tom, I wish I could be like you." And Tom Paris turns to him, and I read it down. He says, "You might want to reconsider that, Harry. There could be prison time involved." So, what have you done, Tom? What the fuck does that mean?
Well, he was part of the Marquis, right? I think Tom was on the Marquis
Yeah,
side. Yeah, he
but they're
was.
talking about how Tom relates to
Yeah.
treats women, and he's saying,
Yeah.
"Well, you might have to go to prison if you act like me."
I think Tom's making a bit of a joke about the fact that, like, hey, you are talking. You want to be like someone who, had we not got stranded in the Delta Quadrant, probably would have been serving prison time. He's being cute about it, but I did like
I
this.
fucking hope so.
Yeah, I did like this back and forth. I did think it was really nice ending this episode on just two men talking quite openly about, like, just admiring attributes of each other and kind of wanting to learn from each other's styles of being, and just having like an open amount of bonding about, like, I admire these things about you, I admire these things about you, bonding as buddies. I thought that was sweet.
I think it's significantly better than if they were just sitting there going, "Oh, look at this planet of beautiful women. It's a shame it was a death trap." But my thing about this episode is that I'm not sure it would have been a great fit for Star Trek in the '60s. Like there's a layer of discomfort that goes beyond just, oh, this is a weird situation that the writer is trying and not particularly carrying off, turning on its head, of the stereotypical island of beautiful women who cannot wait to throw themselves at any man, and then, oh, by the way, it's Jennifer's body. But I don't know, it didn't feel like, and again, I'm not going to put this all on Clink because she is being supervised by a bunch of dudes, so who knows what the process was with this one. But it just feels like it careens a bit too far towards being really, really gross, as opposed to an interesting concept that doesn't quite get carried off.
I think there are worlds where you could do a version of this story that could be interesting. If you were to flip the story and have, like, someone who you wouldn't traditionally expect to be lured in by the siren's call be your target, be that flipping the gender expectations, not having it be one of the men that's lured in by the siren planet, having it be someone who is considerably more strong-willed, and you have to watch this planet like really work harder to win them past their suspicion might be interesting. Like, as much as Ensign Kim makes a really great target in as much as he's really easy to not get to question things, it means that there is very little friction, and that there is very little work required to get him to buy in. Um, and I think that you could have had more texture there with a character who came in skeptical, was won over, and then realized they'd been duped.
Well, I think also Harry Kim is just not a compelling character.
No. There's a reason he gets so few focus episodes.
Yeah, he's fundamentally just a member of the crew, elevated slightly to a recurring role because I don't know, I guess they need that. He doesn't have much of a story as opposed to everyone else on the ship. I think also, the episode is very, very keen that we understand that it's based on the idea of the sirens. Well, why don't you just take that story wholesale?
Yeah.
Why don't you have someone on the ship who is going absolutely bonkers because they feel that they have to go down to this planet and they have to be restrained, right? Because that's the story of Odysseus. He gets tied to the mast because he wants to hear this song.
Don't have it.
And anyone who
don't have it that the infection happened. Have it that while they're in this sector of space, randomly people on the crew keep trying to take over the bridge and trying to steer the ship to this planet.
Yeah, you don't even have to have it on the planet. You just have it on the ship. I mean, I suppose you have to see the planet. You have to see the women to understand that all the dudes are going to be like, panting in the fucking windows or something. But
we had that moment at the start where like Ensign Kim completely ignores like not having permission from Janeway to do something, and like is doing things on the bridge without the captain's leadership. You could have had more examples of that. More of them drawn to try and get the ship to this place. And what do you do when like portions of your crew are mutinying? Because they're all like, I can't tell you why, but I need to be there. That's I need
also
to be
something
at that planet.
That works with Janeway, right?
Yeah.
You have a female captain who isn't necessarily going to be impacted by this force because it's for some reason focused entirely towards men, and so she and I guess B'Elanna and Kez all have to work out what the hell's going on. Probably with I assume the Doctor would be fine. He's a hologram. Even if they did program the hologram with sarcasm, I'm assuming they didn't program it with will be taken in by a siren's call. You could have that kind of closed door mystery on the ship kind of thing while everyone else is contained quarters or whatever. I don't think it works when it's we actively want to show you lots of beautiful women fawning over men. One of those men is going to be Harry Kim, who is apparently incapable of accepting any affection unless it comes from either his mother or Captain Janeway, who he also kind of feels like is his mother figure on the ship.
Yeah, there is a lot of messy visual symbolism there. That when he goes to sleep on that planet and he's having the dreams of like sexy woman trying to kiss me. Now my mother is here, now Janeway is here, now back to sexy women. Now I've woken up in bed with two women, like, crawling all over me, and he's got a lot of issues with women.
You can kind of understand why he's maybe not in the mood if he keeps thinking about his mother and Captain Janeway.
I do appreciate
he's in the middle of a threesome dream, and he's going, yeah, but what about my mum? What about Captain Mum?
There are some bits of this episode I do like, and one of them is that when he wakes up with the two of them in his bed, and he's clearly like, I don't think they do a great job of showing like his realization of there is something wrong here, but I do like his sequence of he's tying one of the women to the chair, like, you'll be one of my wives, and I'll start doing like the marriage thing where it's like, it's sexy that we can't see each other and that your hands are bound. And then when the second woman realizes, like, he's trying to tie us up, I like that he just hits her over the head with a vase.
It's also really interesting because that's like the one point of the episode where Garrett Wang being such a bad actor works. Because it's like Harry Kim is the bad actor, and that's why they realize that, he's actually tricky. And just like he whacks her with a vase, and he goes, sorry about that.
that whole moment.
And tells the woman he's tied up to shush.
Yeah. That whole little sequence, like, from the tying up to him leaving the room, is genuinely really funny. And I think, again, as you say, the fact he's kind of not the greatest actor is why that scene works. Um, one of the other bits of
But imagine if
acting...
the whole episode was like that. Imagine if it was
Yeah.
just this whole episode is just going to be a farce with Harry Kim. That would
Yeah.
work as well.
One of the other bits of acting I wanted to point out in this episode, because there are little bits I did enjoy. When the Doctor is working out, like, oh, actually his DNA hasn't been like this since birth, the moment where the Doctor gets to go, I've worked out a very clever way that we can prove when he got infected. The little, like, uplift in almost giddy excitement at, ooh, I've already worked out how we can do that, is so charmingly acted. It's one of it. He's such a good actor, and it's just these little moments like that that really remind me, like, he did such a lot to carry Voyager as a show. He's so charming.
Well, I think also seeing him in Academy, he's not quite there.
Yeah,
Obviously, it's been like 30 years,
yeah,
something like that. This episode benefits a lot from coming in season 3 when everyone's character is kind of bedded in. All of the actors know what they're doing with their characters, apart from Garrett Wang, pretty much. And that's really true for Robert Picardo. Like, he knows exactly what he's doing when he turns up on that day, and he's just so tight. He's so good at just morphing from this. Oh, I was wrong, but I worked out how I was wrong. Yeah, again, Voyager. I know you love Voyager. I completely understand
you
why
don't
you
have
love
to.
Voyager.
I understand why people don't.
No, I do, because Voyager for me is that one Star Trek series where the good episodes are among the very best Star Trek, but you do get episodes like this which are on par with, like, The Naked Now or something. The cast is so good.
Yeah.
There are so many times when this cast is wasted on this series.
I sort of almost feel the other end of it. I go, even a bad episode of Voyager is often lifted up by its cast to the point that I can go, I had a decent time with that, just by some of these performances. It's got such an all-round good cast that even an episode like this, I can find moments of, you shone through, you kept me with you, even if it's a little few and far between occasionally.
Yeah, I understand that when I say, like, when I suggest that this is a bad episode, it's a bad episode of Star Trek. It's probably a middling episode of television.
It's better
It's
than
not
a
as
lot
if
of
I'm sitting there in the middle going,
Yeah.
I have to turn this off. This is appalling.
It's
I
not
had a
as...
sense
yeah.
of, Laura, what the fuck have you made me watch here?
Oh, to
But
be fair,
it
I
was
was
still
having it
fun.
too. I had fun. Like, even a bad episode of Voyager, I'm never gonna come away from bored. I'm never gonna come away from going, that was a terrible idea. I will at least go, I had fun watching them try and make Ensign Kim realize that women are trying to pursue him. The premise was ridiculous enough. I squeezed some fun out of it.
Well, I think also, and this is me engaging with my tradition of doing a bit of a drive-by on Picard, but also broadly on New Trek. I think that's the difference between this era of Star Trek and what we see now, is that the bad episodes remain fun, they remain watchable. If you're rewatching Star Trek, you're not resenting that you have to watch these episodes if you're watching the whole thing. Whereas I think newer Trek does have those episodes where you're like, I don't want to watch this. I want to turn this off. I resent that I'm having to watch this in the sequence of these episodes. I think there's a charm that's been lost that Voyager had in spades.
A thing that I think is analogous to this is recently with my wife Jane, we watched through all of Doctor Who. And
oh, you poor thing.
That has some rough ups and downs, but I think there is something to be said for with the most recent series of Doctor Who that had Disney funding with Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor, there was something a little lost in the kind of janky charm that comes from this is a little rough around the edges and it is a little janky, but there is something endearing in there that when you reach a certain level of big budget cinematic polish gets sanded off at the edges a little. And there can be some unique joy in a kind of bad episode of a slightly jankier iteration of something that doesn't always translate into a more polished future version of that thing.
Well, I think the original series is like the perfect signifier of that, right?
Yeah.
Some of those episodes do not hold up,
No.
but they're so whimsical and so charming, and the cast is so ingratiating in those episodes that you kind of go, "This is fine."
Yeah.
Whereas, and I say this as someone who has watched very little Doctor Who, but when I sit there and watch the war between the land and the sea, or whatever the fuck that title was, I look at it and go, like, I'm pretty sure that Doctor Who is supposed to be this almost homemade sci-fi, and now we've got big budget, terrible stories, and I think Star Trek had that sense as well. Like everything was a little bit handmade because it was obviously practical, but it had that grainy charm that the more high budget stuff just doesn't.
I'm super okay with watching an episode of Doctor Who or an episode of Star Trek where the alien is very clearly someone you glued green painted bubble wrap to the face of and you're telling me that's an alien. You know what? If you come up with a good fun story, I'll happily look at the green painted bubble wrap and go, yeah, I'll buy that that's an alien, why not? I'm willing to buy in on cheaply made sci-fi if you tell me a good story.
Well, I mean, I liked the alien at the beginning, where it's literally just we've put some red ridges on a guy,
Yeah.
we've painted in blue, good alien. And then the other aliens are, well, we can't have the island of beautiful women be aliens,
Yeah.
so it's just human women with red bits on them.
Where the red bits are mostly hidden by their hairline anyway, so you can just pretend. You can just... They're just women, don't worry about it. They're...
Guys, these are just normal ladies.
They're getting
There's nothing wrong with them at all.
I do find it hilarious that their whole point is we're getting genetic diversity from every corner of space, and yet all of us look like human Earth women of one size and shape.
I mean, I want the backstory of why those other aliens hate those women. Like, did they suck dry one of their friends or something? Because it feels so arbitrary.
I'm assuming that's it.
Obviously,
it's that they've watched enough people, like, you go to that planet and you never come back, and they've developed a mythos around, like, don't go near the sirens, don't go near that part of the ocean. You see beautiful women near that part of the ocean, you shoot them, you kill them, they'll sing their songs.
Or maybe it's that they don't get to go there because they're like proper aliens. They're the incel aliens.
They're not from far enough away. They're not, location diverse enough, so you don't get to come to Planet Fuck.
I mean, we obviously don't see a lot of what's happening there, but the two men we do see there, including Harry Kim, are both humans, right? There's no implication that the other dude is not human. So maybe it's just the more human-presenting aliens are the ones that get drawn in.
There is.
Or that can be infected with
There is an implication that he's not human, because they talk about the fact that none of the embryos sent that far out as Earth, have ever come back yet. Harry Kim is the first embryo sent that far out to have made it back to them, to have been welcomed home. Which does suggest the other guy, despite looking human, must be a humanoid species that just looks like a human.
Which is most of them in Star Trek.
Yeah, he's just the planet of the human-looking men in the Delta Quadrant that isn't Earth.
Yeah. But, okay, I don't know. I still
what are you going to do when a Klingon stumbles here and goes like, we're here to seduce you for your genetic diversity. Where are your Klingon-looking women? Why are none of them attractive to me? It seems
why none of your women
unbeneficial.
beating the shit out of me?
Right. It seems unbeneficial to only have them sexually appeal to humans.
But again, I suppose it might just be that a certain type of alien, whether they're human or whatever, can get infected with whatever Harry Kim got infected with, which again is hand waved away. He was alone for a bit. Well, okay. Well, what did he do while he was alone? Was Harry Kim's first instinct when he wandered off alone to go, I'll just eat that?
That does sound like Harry Kim. That's something he would do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a great episode. It says a lot that I didn't remember this episode existed, and neither did you. And I mentioned it to my wife, and she didn't remember. I described it to her, and she didn't remember it existed. It's not a memorable episode, but I didn't have
It
a
is
terrible.
memorable.
Well, yeah.
Sorry, it's pretty memorable.
I don't know.
think
I'd
it's just
apparently
that Harry
forgot.
Kim isn't.
Okay, yeah. It's a memorable concept starring an unmemorable man.
I've been very mean to Harry Kim. And
No, he
Wang,
deserves
but,
it. Be mean to Harry Kim. No one should ever
But
be nice about him.
Harry Kim is like the worst. And
Yes.
again, no, I mean, maybe there is shade to Garrett Wang. I don't know. He's been in a Kevin Sorbo film before, but he's just. I don't know if he's trying to. I don't remember him being this bad throughout the whole series. I don't know whether he's trying something, whether it's just he's struggling with women crawling all over him.
I don't
but
know
like,
if it's. I don't know if it's just he's not usually given this much uninterrupted time on screen. I think is the problem.
I don't know what to do with myself.
You get a sentence
I've got a starring role.
Yeah, usually there's like, gunshots going off and sirens and things I can hide my acting behind. But now, oh no, everyone's looking at me.
To be fair, I don't think he is alone in being a little bit wooden at times. I do think Robert Duncan McNeil can be quite. Also, complete aside, quite a lot of Roberts in Voyager.
Yeah.
At least 3 Roberts in the main cast. Yes, there's Robert Picardo, Robert Duncan McNeil, and Robert Beltran. Who also plays Chakotay.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
A lot of Roberts. Just one of the things I noticed while I was vaguely watching this episode. That's my closing point. I think is that this episode was so diverting in a bad way that I started noticing patterns in the cast of there's lots of Roberts in this room. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. Which one of them is called Bob on set?
I now am forced to share a fact with you that's only tangentially related because ADHD has taken me in a direction. Did you know in 2023 in the UK there were more lawyers named David than there were female lawyers?
No, but I find that completely believable.
Right? Isn't that a terrible yet so believable a fact? This is a fact.
What was happening in like the 60s that made everyone call their kids David, do you think? I'm assuming it's just lawyers are old, they don't relinquish their positions a lot.
I think it is just how much of an imbalance of gender there is that even just picking an individual name is enough to outnumber female lawyers, which is terrifying news. But yeah, there's an unrelated to Star Trek fact that I needed to get out of my brain, otherwise I wasn't going to be able to finish this podcast.
Maybe you're just preternaturally disposed to being in Star Trek if your name's Robert. That's nonsense, by the way. I was trying
to work
there's
out.
A segue.
Can I draw a long enough series of connections to get Robert to be like, yeah, that leads you to be in Star Trek?
I can't even think of another Robert in Star Trek.
Anyway,
they're all contained in this series, apart from when Robert Picardo was in DS9 for a bit.
Yeah. That's been another episode of where everybody has gone before. Hopefully, at some point, we'll get a good episode of Star Trek to talk about that we can enthusiastically talk start to finish about how much we like it. You know what? We've done 3 spins of the wheel.
That one, didn't I?
We've
talk about Robert. That episode over. We're done. We're clearly finished with this. If you're on your Robert material, Geoffrey, then we are both too tired to continue.
Oh no, it's been too long a day today. We've done 3 spins of the wheel now, and I am tempted to go, is 3 spins of the wheel enough that we can, like, justify next time we do this picking an episode that we know we like to talk about?
Well, my thought on that would be maybe when Academy finishes or for the last episode of Academy, we've discussed previously the idea of possibly talking about an episode of Academy.
Yeah.
Whether that's when we choose one. maybe, because that's 2 weeks away,
Yeah,
which would be
that's.
perfect
I
actually.
think
So we
we can
tend to do
survive
this.
a couple more spins of this wheel and whatever it's
Well, I
gonna
don't know.
deal us.
So we've also done this one a week after the last.
Yeah.
So are we doing one next week?
We'll look at schedules and work it out. We're just trying to get a couple
I
in the
suppose
bank before we start popping them out.
Yeah, I suppose this is all a bit moot because we're not going to release these
Yeah.
when Academy comes out. but you know
No.
what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe that. But we could say let's pick an episode next time.
Indeed. We'll work it out. But
You can edit all that discussion out to get to the goodbye, I guess. That's normally what we talk about after we finish.
Thank you for watching another episode of this show. I'm at Laura K Buzz everywhere on the internet. Geoffrey's at jeffreybunting.com. Is that correct?
Geoffreybunting.co.uk.
.co.uk.
For now, I don't know. I've been thinking of buying jeffreybunting.com. It's available.
You're not having to fight people off, in a fist fight for it yet.
But .co.uk.
.co.uk.
That's it. I'm nowhere else on the internet.
Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. We'll have another episode for you in a couple of weeks. Goodbye.
Bye.